Greetings, everyone. I come from UNESCO MGIEP that is based in New Delhi, and will be talking to you today about socio-emotional learning and how we feel that this is the key to building global citizenship. My name is Nandini Chatterjee Singh, and I'm a neuroscientist by training. So before I get into the details about socio-emotional learning, let me tell you a little bit about where I come from. So UNESCO MGIP is a new institute that's been set up in New Delhi. It's the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development and is UNESCO's first Category 1 institute in the Asia Pacific region. It is focused on sustainable development goals towards education for building peaceful and sustainable societies across the world. And our primary mandate is to transform education for humanity. Specifically, the Institute employs a whole brain approach. So the idea is to root all our interventions in science and the evidence that comes from science. And our programs are designed to primarily mainstream socio-emotional learning, or as we now call it SEL in education systems, to build innovative digital pedagogies, to decide and to find ways so that the advances in technology can be leveraged to scale the best practices in pedagogy and education to people across the world. And finally, to empower youth as global citizens who are going to drive and transform education for humanity in the future. Okay. So let me tell you about how we came about to decide socio-emotional learning as a primary theme that needs addressing and mainstreaming into education systems. In 2016, UNESCO MGIP commissioned a Youth Speak survey, and some of the statements that emerged from the survey were: some people in this world should have more opportunities than others. In times of insecurity and conflict, it is sometimes necessary to use force against others to maintain law and order. And there are fixed roles for men and women, and these are important to bring stability to society. And this was a survey that we did across 126 countries. And I'm sure you all realize that this is indeed a state for all of us to be worried about and something that needs to be addressed immediately. Okay. So we believe that this emphasis that education has had so far on material well-being and economic growth is one of the primary reasons why such attitudes have and mindsets have developed in people. As a consequence, there has also been an increasing prevalence of unhappiness, insecurity, very poor interpersonal relationships, and the tendency to completely ignore behaviors that are emotionally satisfying. Okay. And so this sole focus on economic growth has not led to human well-being. It has led to a lot of material acquisition, but it has not led to human well-being and well-being for humanity. Okay. So the operative word here being human well-being, let me share with you what we feel comprises human well-being. Human well-being is the recognition that everyone around the world, regardless of geography, age, culture, religion, or political environment, aspires to live well. Okay. And here is where this links back really well to the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goal 4.7 is what I have listed up here on the slide, which is education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And I would like to draw your attention to the part that is highlighted in blue: promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity. We strongly believe it's this cultural diversity which makes human beings so special, and it's crucial that we learn to cherish it, enjoy it, and see how we can really improve upon building this awareness in people across the world. So we've gone back and to go ahead and design and propose a new curriculum which we call Libre, which we believe will be a curriculum for whole brain learning. And it is primarily in response to address these concerns in SDG 4.7. The 4 components of Libre specifically are critical inquiry, mindfulness, empathy, and compassion. And what really distinguishes this curriculum is the fact that each constituent component of Libre is rooted in neural circuitry, which takes me back to the primary difference that has come about in our understanding about education and learning, which has come from the field of neuroscience and specifically a lot from education neuroscience and contemplative neuroscience too. So let me take you back quickly to the brain. So we know that the primary way that the brain learns, or the primary purpose of education, is to train the brain. And what research has shown over the last 40 years is we primarily have two components to this. And one is the thinking brain, which is primarily the neocortex, okay, the part that is highlighted in gray, and the specific part of it, the prefrontal cortex, that is highlighted in blue, is what plays an important role in what current education systems have been designed for. But there's another very important part of the brain called the emotional brain, which comprises the limbic system, which is outlined here in red, okay, which is also a very important part of being human. And unfortunately, education systems so far have not focused on nourishing or nurturing the emotional brain. Okay. The other important learning that neuroscience has brought to fore is the fact that all learning is essentially a nature or a form of plasticity. By plasticity, I mean the different connections in the brain change when students are exposed to learning and external stimuli. And the primary purpose of education is to build these new circuits in human beings. So neuroplasticity is a fundamental principle which forms the basis of all learning. And what you see up in this figure here are the new connections that are built between different regions of the brain when learning happens. Central to this is the finding that we now know that socio-emotional learning can actually be taught. And this therefore brings us to a novel new idea that well-being is something that we can actually train people to do. And it's this understanding that we now want to build into education systems. Okay. So to come back to the four competencies that we really want to build are the critical inquiry network. So the primary point we want to bring back into education, which seems to have gotten lost in the last 30 years, is the art of questioning. The ability to use rationality to resolve conflict. And if intuition and rationality point to different directions, if they give rise to cognitive dissonance, how can we try and arrive at a resolution which is a well thought out inquiry-based approach? So the idea is to use questioning, analytical reasoning, rational inquiry to diffuse the uncertainty that arises in almost all the situations that we face today, whether it is choosing whether one should eat pasta or Chinese for lunch, or whether one should choose music or engineering for a career. The different parts of the brain that are trained whilst the process of inquiry happens are what are outlined in the figure on the right. And you can see that almost all parts of the brain are addressed when one is specifically building the network for critical inquiry. A second phenomenon that has sort of almost overtaken the world these days in many formats, but which we want to focus in a very specific way, is that of mindfulness. And here we think of mindfulness as that of attention regulation. We know that unless the brain is engaged in the classroom, it will not be able to learn. And therefore, socio-emotional learning, of which attention regulation is a crucial factor, must ensure that the child in the classroom has his brain engaged in what's happening in the classroom. And thus, children need to be taught the ability to voluntarily bring back wandering attention over and over again back to what is happening in the classroom and to the question at hand. It is important to focus on what one is doing at that specific point in time And thus, watching a television program or doing something very different, even when one is eating food, a simple meal, takes away half the joy of it. I'm sure all of you have experienced it at some point in time. And so, whether it's lunch, whether it's dinner, or it's sitting in the classroom, it's important that attention be directed and focused to the activity at hand, because only then will the circuits of the brain engage in what is actually being directed towards them. The third is regulating emotions. Okay, very crucially and very important for human beings is the ability to feel socially and emotionally connected to what's happening around us. And therefore, empathy, that is the ability to experience and understand what others feel, is something that needs to be consciously inculcated in children. But it is important to realize that people can be in different settings, and therefore the role of perspective taking is very crucial. It's one thing to actually think we understand what's happening in somebody else's mind, but it's different to actually get into the shoes of other people. And I would urge you to try this exercise for yourself, maybe once you go back home today, is to try wearing somebody else's footwear and walking around the house for some time. It's not a very comfortable feeling. It makes you very, very aware that you're wearing somebody else's shoes. And this ability to recognize why somebody else might respond to something because of a different perspective that they have on that particular idea is something that we consciously want to inculcate in our children. As human beings, we know that people respond to a stronger preference for spending time with others rather than being alone. And therefore, it is important for us to be able to understand each other's perspectives. It is also equally important for us to understand that perspective but not get into it. And we want to certainly caution against empathetic distress. We don't want to get that involved into somebody else's shoes so that we get lost in that cause, but instead retain the ability to critically inquire and instead go ahead and practice compassion, which is the last point I want to emphasize on. The ability to practice compassion is to show and to actually act on a concern for the suffering and distress of others. And it has now been shown through some very, very interesting neuroscience data that compassion can actually foster human well-being. Okay. This ability to practice compassion on a regular basis has gone on to play an important role in motivating and promoting pro-social behavior. So I want to draw back your attention to the fact that this is a conscious choice we want to make. The ability to actually take action to be able to make a difference is something we want our children to consciously learn and begin to practice. Okay. These different components have been covered together in terms of competencies through a curriculum for global citizenship. And the different modules that we will cover in this global citizenship curriculum are what are outlined on this slide up now. Okay. So we want children to understand the difference between fighting for terrorism versus fighting for freedom, how human migration has, which is now a global phenomenon, has changed the perspective of the world, what democracy can mean as a form for governance. It is equally important that we participate in that democracy very actively. How a nationhood and entitlement are features that need to be examined critically. How crucial it is for us to have healthy identities of ourselves and to move away from stereotypes, to be able to embrace cultural diversity. And finally, to also recognize the different causes and types of violence. Okay. So these are all typically subjects that are not taught as part of our classrooms or as part of our curricula, but as subjects that pervade our surroundings 24/7. And it is important that we empower our children to be able to handle them, deal with them, and to be able to take the right actions as they go forth in life. Okay. MGIP proposes to deliver this entire curriculum of Libre through a digital learning platform. We have come to recognize that technology has made tremendous leaps and advances and can now allow us the power of creating experiences. Okay. So we have created and built indigenously a new online learning platform which is extremely interactive in nature. It's called Kai Mind, and the Kai stands for Collective Human Intelligence. Okay. The platform is under development and will be ready by the end of the year for rollout from the month of January, and will actually embody different digital pedagogies like games, discussions, dialogue, chats between friends, also called buddy chats, and journaling, a very important part of reflection and the activities of mindfulness and empathy. So through Libre, we hope to build a new community of youngsters who are now getting trained into the competencies that Libre embodies. And we hope this will go on to build the global citizens that we all strongly believe the world now deserves. Thank you for your time and attention. And should you need any other clarifications or want to know more about the program, please feel free to reach out to us through the website down below. Thank you and have a great meeting.